So I am driving down to San Diego right now to Epic Gardening's Kevin's Homestead, the Epic Homestead. So first of all, Kevin from Epic Gardening, aside from just being such a nice man and truly brilliant when it comes to gardening, he's a big deal. He's taught millions of people how to garden. He is such a resource and just a really kind, humble person. And I am beyond honored that he would let me come take a tour. I mean, who has the audacity to just DM someone on Instagram and be like, can I come check out your garden at your private home? I do. I'm that person. It was so great to see his space. I really admire the work that he does as a businessman, as a gardener, as a person. He's doing such great work in the world for gardening and for people, and I just really admire it. So we're driving down there and I have a ton of questions I'm gonna ask him. But mainly this is just an inspiration outing to see how he plants his Zone 10 garden, same zone as mine, and just kind of how he's made use of his space. I don't know how much land he has, but I'm really excited because I do believe it's more of an urban suburban setting than anything else. So I'm excited to kind of see how he's mapped it out. I'm so excited. So this is the Epic Homestead.
This is it.
I'm excited.
This is it. Yeah, let's take a look around.
Yeah, let's take a look. I didn't realize how much is in your front yard.
Yeah. I think I probably spend so much time in the back because it's got a lot of different elements that I love spending time around, like the chickens and all that. But the front yard is like the homage to the old garden that I used to have in 2018, 2019, which is like raised beds, containers, small-ish space, although I spread it out a little bit more than I used to have. But yeah, this is the front yard. This is like the urban example of what you can grow.
Totally.
Yeah.
What is your square footage in terms of
the whole
actual
property?
land, and then how much is land?
The whole lot is like 13,000.
Oh, really?
So it's like 0.3 acres.
Okay.
Plantable is, I would say maybe 80% of that, because when I moved in, it was basically a dirt weedy lot and then 1,000 square foot home.
Yeah.
And so there's some hardscape here. Call it maybe 9,000 square foot. I could in theory plant.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I haven't,
But I have to say, what I love is how you have tall beds for your tall stature, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm 6'4", so like this action is great, and this one's a little bit hard. I don't mind it still. It has its own purpose, but we grow tall stuff in short beds. We go short stuff in tall beds, right? So for accessibility, it all ends up kind of roughly at the same height. For us, these are great. I mean, obviously we love and sell these beds, and it's been cool to see like elderly communities get into it, disabled gardeners get into it.
Yeah.
To me, like whatever makes gardening easier, I'm here for. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so what do we have growing up front here? And is it strategically up here for a reason, or did you just kind of go willy-nilly?
Something we need to get better at here is actually rotating these beds a little bit better. So we're growing for food, but also for education, because that's primarily what we do. And so a lot of the times we have to leave a bed empty like this one. We're testing an irrigation kit out.
Cool.
So we're messing around with it here. And over here we have, I think Jock showed, so it's a mustard or something like that. Oh yeah, this is a bunching onion that didn't germ. We've had some germ problems over here. But as you can see, the front yard is not super active. There's like a carrot bed here. We just put in some summer varieties of broccoli and cauliflower, supposed to perform better in the heat.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In this bed we thinned and also didn't thin certain areas.
Yeah.
So like here's one we thinned. It's an okay carrot, and then the one this is like two right next to each other we didn't thin. Just testing, just like what happens if you do, what happens if you don't, and learning. And to me, it's like you only have so many seasons of growing, and so like how much can you test and figure out so that your 5th, 6th, 7th season is super productive.
Yeah. I feel like we're lucky down here because we it's year-round gardening, so you don't just have one season every year. We get I like to say 4, but I get 2 solid.
2 solid, yeah.
I feel like I can grow better in the swing times than in a traditional growing season. And that's always been my challenge when I'm chatting with people about stuff is I'm like, well, nasturtium's my favorite plant. And I always it just grows well in the swing seasons in our climate. So when someone's trying to grow it in the summer, I'm like,
good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the way I learned it was from my friend Brigitte of San Diego Seed Company, and she's like, really, you have a warm season here and a cool season, and then you have the shoulder seasons transitioning between the two.
Yep.
And so like that helped us out a lot here last season with brassicas, because I had always planted them just a little too late.
Yeah.
Like I planted them, really you should plant them, at least in my climate, in late fall or mid-fall.
Yeah.
And grow them through the winter.
Yeah.
Harvest them like right as winter's ending, and that's what we did this year. We had an amazing crop.
Yeah.
So it's, try telling that to someone in zone 6, it doesn't make sense.
Brutal.
Right? So this part of the yard is the how to grow in urban spaces part of the yard.
Cool.
Like that's sort of the theme, right? And so do I have to grow in grow bags on my property? Of course not anymore, but I still want to show how you can do it.
Yep.
So this is just this is like a little test we set up, speaking of testing, where it's 5, 7, 10, 15 gallon grow bags for tomatoes and peppers, same variety, same soil, same everything. The only thing that's different is the container.
Yeah.
So we're just going to show people like, here's how container size affects growth. While also having a container garden.
Yeah.
My old garden was basically what you see here, except for the spaces between the beds were 10 inches.
Yeah.
And maybe there was like a path that was like this big.
Yeah.
And I crammed, I think, like 10 beds in that space. But I just couldn't work in it, right?
Yeah.
Eventually. You just have to tiptoe around and stuff. So bags were in between rows and stuff.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so talk to me about, so you have fruit trees over here.
Sure. I mean, this tree was existing when I moved in. So this is I don't know what type of grapefruit it is, but it's some sort of grapefruit. We don't like it much. It's like very pithy. So that's probably actually coming down to be replaced by 2 others. But the whole back row is all citrus, which, that's going to grow actually fantastically in Arizona. And so the whole goal with that is planted it 4 foot on center and then actually prune over the years into a wall. I don't know how much work that's going to be, but the plan is to have it literally be a blockade, like a wall.
Yes.
And that they'll successfully ripen throughout the year.
Right.
So that's why the spacing is so close, because otherwise that's an insanely close space.
Yeah. Okay, so 4 foot on center in between. No, I love this. So we're doing something similar for like privacy hedge-ish, but I'll probably do like the vine behind on a fence. So how tall will these guys get? Like, is it going to limit their height?
That's up to me, right? So I'll do active pruning most of the time, and I'll probably keep them no taller than about 8 feet ever. So I'll always prune them down to that.
Are any of these dwarf? They all full?
Some are dwarf, some are semi-dwarf, some are standard. So if you're actively pruning citrus, it doesn't really matter what the rootstock is. You can just keep it at that height. So I selected the rootstock not for dwarfing, but for like soil qualities, like it does better in clay, or doesn't have to deal with this particular pest. Yeah.
What is your soil like here?
It's pretty much clay. Yeah, it's pretty much. I wouldn't call it like super heavy clay, but there's not much of it.
Living that clay life.
Yeah.
So how many is this? It looks like you have other trees back here too, but how many trees do you have here in this portion?
So I believe there's 10 or 11 citrus in the back, and then you can see there's a couple we're about to plant.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 or 3 nectarine, a peach, 2 pomegranates, a papaya, and a loquat. And then the stuff we're about to plant, there's a fig right there.
Yeah.
And then of course there's the dragon fruit, which not a fruit tree, but kind of in my world.
Yeah.
So there were multiple times in our interview that I looked back after the fact and was like, why did I say that? Why did I ask that? What was I actually thinking? So Kevin, if you're watching this, just have mercy on me. I feel like I'm lacking socialization and interview skills. I'm gonna blame it on the past 2 years of the world. But it was super, super fun. And it was really cool to see Kevin's so big into teaching, obviously, but testing as well, which is something I love and I do and I talk about. Like, you just have to test and try things and get to know plants and get to know plants in your garden, in your space, in your microclimate, all the things. Kevin's the master of that. And it was really fun to see how that plays out in his yard and in his space. And I really walked away from the interview feeling like there's no right or wrong way to garden. The best way is the way that works well for you, and using just science, experience, knowledge, education, using all the tools you have at your mental disposal to grow what you want to grow and figure it out in your space. And truly, I mean, that's what Kevin teaches, but it was really fun to see it, played out at his homestead, at his home. So the garden there is definitely set up for multiple things. One, obviously maximizing space and growing incredible flowers and food and produce and plants and all the things. But it's also really, I would consider it a teaching garden. So it was really cool to see the way he's sort of broken his garden into themes to fulfill the purposes of how he's educating people. I think the home gardener can also kind of look at their space in that way, where it's like, okay, what is the purpose of certain areas of the garden and how do we make that work? I've talked in the past about designing this little ledge we have with trees. And Kevin mentions some backyard orchard philosophies and approaches. I didn't include it here in the video, but I'll put it in the notes. And that's something I'm going to be studying. But I do love the way that he has broken his property into chunks and sort of created these little micro areas that have specific purposes.
There was no easy way to get from front to back with a design like this where you have like a theme of gardens, like urban front yard, productive orchard, like perennial artichokes, and then as you get into the back there's different themes. I wanted a connection between both that was wide enough for like a big wheelbarrow or maybe like a skid steer or something if we're doing some work in the backyard. And so to me, like, weirdly, one of my favorite things that we've put in is just a pathway, just something to walk on. You know, something that's like, this is like I don't know what to call this, I'm not much of a design person, but it's like this cobblestone-y type of look with like a modern edge. So it kind of has this half in, half out antique modern look, I guess. So yeah, I'm super pleased about this.
That's nice. We are choosing pathways, and it's like more emotional than I thought it was going to be the entire process.
Yeah, like we had the guys, so Ackerstone, we worked with Ackerstone on this, who does all sorts of different pavers. He came down with a truck and I was like, okay, this with this, no, this with this. You know, you're just like playing Legos basically and changing it out.
For sure.
Yeah.
And this is beautiful. We have these same climbing roses too that do really well and bloom like twice a year.
This is my first foray into the climbing roses, which has been really fun. I like come in and weave them up, and yeah, it's super cool.
You'll be like out there buying David Austin's with all.
You know, we just had David Austin, someone on David Austin came on the podcast.
How was that?
Super fast, because I want to get more into roses, but I want to educate, so I just asked her all the questions I wanted to know. So yeah, I'll be getting more into roses this year for sure.
Okay, so the dragon fruit is cool, and it's such a feature when you walk through.
It's kind of a nice like liner, I feel like. It doesn't block off what's behind it, but it's, especially once these start to droop, because they're not quite at the point where gravity's taking them down. I mean, dragon fruit kind of looks like cousin it when it grows in, and then when flowers start to form and fruit starts to form, that's when it's like the best time of year for dragon fruit. It's such a pretty flower. Huge flower.
Crazy. It is really pretty.
This is like one of my favorite plants in general, so obviously I have 6 of them.
Now I'm gonna have to grow them. Now that I said I wasn't
it's
going
very
to,
fun.
I'm gonna do
it honestly is very fun. 2 artists actually that we worked with to do some custom beds earlier last year came back and did this, like just little elements from like kind of inside jokes of like our favorite plants. Jock, our garden hermit, you can't see it, but he's behind the cover crop over there in the corner, like with his little mushrooms and stuff. So yeah, it's just a way to kind of brighten up the space. Super stoked about it.
I love it. Okay, so you just built the pond.
Pond came in,
which is incredible.
And
also, like, I'm curious to hear. So you love edibles, right?
Primarily. Primarily.
So what will you be growing in the pond?
So actually, what you see there is already edible. So most
watercress.
There's watercress around most of the pond, and then over there there's elephant ear taro, which you can dig up to the root. Everything else is not edible yet. I plan to do something around the pond side, which is weird because it's actually a lined pond. So it's not like the pond side is somehow more moist. So you're gonna have to irrigate it, and if you're gonna plant ponds type stuff. But either way, we'll probably do like aeoniums and stuff on that lower layer, and then more like riverside type of stuff on the perimeter.
Also the micro meadow I'm like completely obsessed with, and the whole concept of like meadowing, if that's the word. I don't know if it is.
It's weird. I'm going to talk about the podcast again, but we just had Mike Lazat from American Meadows on, and his whole thing is like growing mini meadows in backyards. And so I was like, does this count? Because it's just a cover crop, it's just a fall mix. And he's like, oh yeah, totally. Obviously he does wildflowers, he does tubers and all that, but he's like, oh yeah, I mean, it completely works, and you can see over there, there's just all sorts of life.
There is,
right? I mean, there's probably some pests, but also I've seen a bunch of monarchs in there too, which would definitely not be there if that was just barren, which is exactly what it was before.
Pieces of inspiration that I took home with me, the micro meadow I have to do. And it was so cool, super beautiful. And I just loved that part of the garden. I also really was mentally taking crazy notes when Kevin talked about potatoes, which he's the master at growing. I also loved the way he's growing his fruit trees. And I think there's just so much to learn from the testing and the trying in terms of what to grow.
What this is just a patchwork of basically raised in-ground beds. The first foray into like legit in-ground gardening.
Yeah.
And so this is the area where I made that video on tilling.
Yeah.
I was like, look, like we did one season with it. It was okay. We tilled in a bunch of compost. Everything we did this year, or this past season, with that tilled in mix was way better.
Yeah. But what did you guys do to build those up?
So what we did is there weren't any chips here, and what we did is we threw a ton of compost in the area, like tons and tons, and tilled it about 6 to 10 inches deep or something like that, and then just measured out, because I'm very sort of geometric in my thinking, and so measured out exactly how far they want it to be, equidistant paths and stuff, and then just shoved a little bit of altitude on those beds, you know?
Yep.
And then just formed them, and that's pretty much it. They hold their shape pretty well.
Yeah.
We kind of tidy them up every replanting, and it works really well, honestly. Yeah.
Someone. Okay, so show me what's out here. If
Sure.
you have-
Yeah, you actually missed the great harvest. So we just had, we had potatoes here.
Yeah.
We had these huge heads of cabbage here, like 12 heads of cabbage. We had a bunch of Brussels sprout right here. We just harvested that out, but we just put some more in. It's funny because whenever you grow potatoes in ground, you never get them all. And so we have more potatoes growing in the ground. This is another test. This is that broccoli and cauliflower I was telling you about, that summer sort of preference one. We're doing, I believe, 18-inch spacing, and then we're doing foot spacing.
Yeah.
And harvesting earlier and later, respectively, to see what we get as far as like production out of a square footage.
Cool.
So that's something we're testing out there. Over this is a really random bed. This is like fennel in the front, bachelor button. There's some random vetches, a cover crop that kind of popped through.
Yeah.
And then your favorite right there, nasturtiums.
Yes.
You can see nasturtiums have infiltrated a lot of our beds actually. So it's in the beet bed there.
She's a tricky.
Yeah, it's in our herb bed there. This is our radish turnip bed that's obviously gone to flower. These two beds,
Those turnips are huge.
Yeah, let's take a look. I mean, I think they're pretty big. Yeah, this is a big boy right here. Weird, little misshapen. You can see some pest issues, but still pretty solid.
Yeah. Is there anything you've done, any approaches like that so far, where you're like, I've found like my way of doing it for this?
Well, with potatoes.
Okay.
Yeah, potatoes I've probably tried to grow almost every way you could.
Okay.
And for us, what I like to do is bury them probably twice as deep as recommended.
Okay.
And then just never hill it.
Okay.
Just let it grow.
Okay.
And yeah, you might get slightly less yield, but also you don't have to mulch it, you don't have to hill it, you don't have to do any management. So I'll take like absolutely zero management for like maybe 10% less potatoes.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the way I've done that.
When do you plant them?
For us, you can, honestly, potatoes is almost year round. It's almost any time. I would say probably avoid planting it right into the heat of summer. Like plant it after summer, or right in fall, or maybe late winter into spring. So you kind of have 3 windows maybe for potatoes here.
Yeah. So out here, is your plan going to be to continue to do everything in ground, or do you think you'll eventually do like wooden raised beds or anything?
Or probably not. I think it's going to be all in ground and more of like, this is almost like micro farm approach, I would call it. Because I already have the raised beds, and we're trying to show like diverse amount of different growing techniques. Because what if someone really does not have a huge budget but does have a yard and is okay doing like a row or bed farm with just a little compost and digging it in? That's totally fine. We want to show them how to do that.
For sure. Yeah. I'm actually really drawn to the beauty of the more like micro farm approach. Like I think it's a really beautiful way for everything to grow, and it's actually maximizing the space. And when we've built these, I felt like also you can get away with smaller pathways, which is nice.
I agree.
You're just not dealing with like a structure.
You're usually not bringing too much through here, and of course you're connected to the soil itself. So if you have a deep rooted crop, there's no limit to how far down it can go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So So yeah, it's just kind of dialing it in. Like all the infrastructure is kind of in place now.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, okay, well, let's make sure everything's producing all the time. We're turning our compost over. It's like getting the system working.
Yeah. Okay, my final question.
Yeah.
How much, or if any at all, like woo do you do in the garden? I'm talking like biodynamics, gardening by the moon, crystals in the garden, any of that stuff.
0%. Yeah. Do you do any?
Yeah, a little bit.
You do a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, I know.
I've dabbled.
I know people get into it. I got no problems with it. I just stick to stuff that I know for sure is true.
Yeah.
Because I just know a lot of people come to us, and so like maybe I don't personally think it's true, but maybe the burying the cow's head or the cow's horn and the cosmic energy of the moon. It's like maybe it does work, right? Maybe it actually does. I haven't seen any evidence, and so if I haven't, then I feel like I can't say
for sure
that it does to our audience at least. But I mean, everyone's got their own tricks.
I've tested out. I mean, I'll try any like old wives' tale for sure. But a lot of my like personal family members are really into gardening by the moon, like Farmer's Almanac style, where it's like they will not sow a seed unless it's like waxing gibbous or something.
Oh, interesting.
It's like very specific, and it aligns with like all of that. And so it's just interesting. It's like I think the folklore behind plants and flowers and all of it is so interesting.
Yeah, there's so much. And then you look back to like where it's all from different cultures, even religion. It's really interesting. Yeah, how it all comes together. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to just see everything, and like it's fun to see how other people utilize their space, especially in an urban suburban setting.
Totally.
I just feel like that is the future of gardening, and there's this very like bucolic desire. Everyone wants to like run away to the farm, but I don't think that is what you expect it to be. First of all, and I think you can create the environment that you want, the lifestyle that you want, in a really small space.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully where it ends up going is that millions of people have micro little garden farms in their backyard like this.
Yep.
And then at scale, what does that do to our food supply? It's way more resilient.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And maybe that's fine. Maybe you retrofit the suburbs instead of move out of the suburbs.
I think that is, I mean, from the research I've done, like permaculture-wise, I feel like as well, like if you can retrofit the suburbs, you actually, it's like voting with your dollars, right? Like you're just starting
100%.
to like, and then you have so much more control, and there's so many, and this is getting into like,
this gets into the philosophy of it all.
And all of that too, but it's just like, I don't know, I think it's the way to go.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, if everyone grew like the most perishable, worst food mile greens at their home, for example, demand would plummet at stores, which would mean it wouldn't get ordered, which would mean it wouldn't get grown, which would mean that wouldn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
So at scale, hopefully that ends up happening.
Well, and the thing about it too, I feel like those are like the easiest things to grow. Like anyone could grow in like a gutter hanging
herbs,
over.
leafy greens, and all that stuff. So easy. Yeah. Totally.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
All in all, my experience at the Epic Homestead was incredible. Kevin was so gracious and so kind. And he is truly such a treasure when it comes to gardening in the States, in the world, inspiring people to grow things. He is a man among men, and I'm just super grateful for the opportunity to get to know him better and see the homestead.